Hi guys, welcome back again. I'm going to do another video on this sort of lifestyle health series that I've been talking about, focusing a bit on middle-aged. It's kind of specific to males, but a lot of this will apply to anyone. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about diet and some of the myths and the falsehoods and fallacies that surround nutrition, because there's loads of them, especially on social media. I spoke a bit about a lot of the falsehoods to do with training, and some of that was based around diet, but mostly around supplements. So I want to talk more about actual, normal diet rather than fitness supplements. And having been brought up through the 70s and 80s, if you guys have as well, you'll probably be aware, you probably had parents that, like mine, would espouse whatever, they had heard from the government at the time, and there was lots of different sort of governmental drives, and they led a lot of us into some, strange thoughts about food that really weren't very healthy and weren't helpful to us, and a lot of us still believe those things today. So obviously the box in the background, one of those things was whole grain cereals real healthy for you. So what do we mean by whole grain? So whole grain refers to the grains that the cereals are made out of, the cereal grains, and there's a bit of a marketing scam that goes on. So a real whole grain breakfast would be porridge, oats, whole oats, just whole oats, and you would have them with maybe some milk or water. That is truly a whole grain breakfast. The good thing about eating whole grains is that carbohydrates get broken down in the body when you eat them, and they get used and broken down, and the glycogen from the carbohydrates is shipped off by insulin, because insulin levels rise in your body when you eat carbohydrates, and insulin basically ships those that glycogen off around the body, and it's used for energy. Now excess glycogen can't be used all for energy, so excess glycogen will in the end be gotten rid of, or some stored as fat. It will be converted and stored as fat, and this is where diabetics may struggle, because if they eat something that's got way too much carbs in it and they don't have enough insulin to shuttle it around, that stuff's just all sitting around in the bloodstream, and they end up with really high blood sugar levels. So when you eat something like whole oats, it takes a long time for the stomach to break those oats down, the digestive process. You've got stomach acids and stuff working away, and those oats, even though you've chewed them up, they're still quite whole and fibrous. They're quite large pieces even when they've been chewed. So it takes a while, and the glycogen, the carbohydrates, are being released really slowly into the bloodstream, so your insulin is able to shuttle that off. You're burning energy whilst you're digesting stuff as well, so the glycogen is then taken around, some of it's being used for energy, and it's being stored, etc, etc. So everything's going very nicely. Nothing's getting elevated to any crazy level. Your insulin doesn't have to be released in vast amounts. Then you get stuff like this. So I don't know of any of these type of breakfast cereals that I would actually recommend, unless they're maybe really niche ones from health food shops, but pretty much any of these big brand cereals all share something in common. So they lie, and they play with the truth. So it says on there, made with whole grains. Well, of course it's made with whole grains, because it's a cereal. So they've taken some whole grains, and that's the starting process, and then they've processed the hell out of them. So what they generally do is they will buy a lot of these things really cheaply off farmers that are selling cereal product, and it's not of maybe a high enough quality to go into certain other products, and they will sell this stuff off in bulk, and it will already be ground into a fine powder or whatever, and that powder will then be shaped and reconstituted by these guys that make these cereals, and it will be formed into these shapes, and you'll be sold that as a breakfast cereal. It will then add a load of additives put with it as well as it's being formed. So generally they will fortify it with various vitamins so that they can substantiate some kind of ridiculous health food claim about it being full of iron and full of vitamins and minerals. That stuff is cheap as hell to stick in it, and it allows them to make these kind of false claims, which are especially appealing to mothers, you know, that want to give their kids as much nutrition as possible. So that ticks that box. No artificial colours or flavours. Well, you know, it's basically the colour of oats, so I don't know why you would have any artificial colours or flavours. And you probably don't need an artificial flavour because it's got so much sugar in it that there's literally no room for any other flavour. So you can see from the front of the box on this one, it's, you know, all orange, and then the red one, sugars 14 grams per, and that's the other thing they do. You think, oh, 14 grams of sugar, that's, you know, per 45 gram bowl. And if you were to pull 45 grams of cereal out of there and stick it in a bowl, you would find that was about a quarter of the portion that any normal sized human being would eat. If you poured out a portion yourself that you actually wanted to eat that was normal for anyone, it would probably be about 150 grams, something like that. So that's a really, really sly way of saying that these things are quite healthy. That's kind of like advertising a Big Mac burger and saying it's only got 50 calories, but then when you get the burger, you know, it's only that round and that high, and you're like, well, yeah, it's only got 50 calories, but it's like one bite of a burger. So that's a disingenuous way of trying to sell you health food. There are so many better things you could have for your breakfast over and above these crappy cereals that are all processed to hell. They're all full of sugars. You know, the reason they taste nice is because they're full of sugar. If something is super convenient and you just pour it out and it's like a 30-second job, generally speaking, it's not going to be great for you. The same goes with porridge. You know, I meet people that go, oh, I'm healthy, I eat porridge every day. I think, oh great, well what one do you have? Oh, I get these really nice ones that come in a little pot and you just add water when you get to work. So again, those oats have been ground to hell. They're almost a dust, you know, it's like ready break or something, and then they've added a bunch of sugar and a bunch of flavourings to it. So you're basically intaking now just powdered carbohydrates. So people go, oh, but I don't eat sugar though. You know, I wouldn't have sugar because sugar's bad. But you'd have powdered carbohydrates. That's literally the same thing. Eat sugar, eat carbohydrates that are a powder. It has exactly the same effect on the body. No different. So I don't know why people have this idea that you know, there's a difference there. You know, like powdered oats do have a place in my diet. Sometimes you need fast acting carbs. So if I've just been to the gym and I've trained super hard and I want to have a post-workout shake, and the whole point of a post-workout shake is to stop your body from becoming catabolic and burning its own muscle tissue, because you've exhausted all the glycogen supplies in your bloodstream. Your body is desperately trying to repair itself, and it will catabolize its own muscle tissue in order to repair damage in other places. That also happens if you're seriously ill in hospital. You know, the body will eat into itself to repair damage because it can afford to lose some muscle tissue to repair what it thinks is important, and it will always repair immediate damage before it concerns itself with, you know, tearing down muscle tissue, because it knows it can afford to tear down muscle tissue, but it isn't sure it can get away with not repairing damage. So the body will always focus on that. It's a kind of fail-safe mechanism, so that's a good thing. But what you need in that post-workout shake or meal is some really fast-acting carbohydrates, because you're replenishing all the lost glycogen. So at that point your body's like an empty vessel for glycogen and it just needs it back quick. Great. And that's a big clue with the rest of your diet. You know, your body needs food, and you shouldn't be scared to eat and fearful to have what you need. But what it doesn't need to do is overconsume. So that's a big mistake that people tend to make, and that has to do with looking at the calorific intake, which is important. So it's important to look at the calories on what you're eating and work out around about how many calories you think you should be eating. You can go on a internet calorie calculator. It will ask you, you know, what are you, male, female, what height are you, what do you weigh, what's your age, etc., etc., and it'll spit out some sort of calorific daily intake, which will basically be you know, it'll take into account your lifestyle. If you're sedentary, if you work in an office, versus if you're like working on an oil rig or something like that, you're obviously going to be burning more calories. And you should be able to, with a bit of tinkering around, after a few weeks, you'll kind of work out where your maintenance calories are. So other foods that people talk about that are really good, and again, some of these are like sort of 70s, 80s type things that remind me of my mum talking about foods. Like she would say, and my mate's mums as well, oh, don't eat bread, have a rice cake. Now apparently that was thought to be some sort of miracle thing, and actually I speak to people that go to these Weight Watchers groups and stuff, and they still talk about rice cakes. Rice cakes are bloody terrible because they're just puffed up rice. So again, they're trying to make out that they're whole grain things because you can see the pieces of rice there. But they've been processed to hell. They've been, you know, dried out, puffed up. So when you crunch that rice into a dust immediately in your mouth and swallow it, you're now swallowing carbohydrate powder, which, as we discussed, is virtually the same as sugar. The body's just going to spike its insulin levels through the roof. Yes, they're very low in calories because they're 99% air. So, you know, you're not getting a really big snack that's low in calories. You're eating a load of air with some compressed carbohydrates around it, which are just going to turn into dust as soon as you eat them. So, I mean, if you have to eat something like that, for God's sake, just eat a decent quality biscuit cracker. Rice cakes are awful. You know, at least if you've got a really good quality, like whole grain wheat cracker, the sort of thing you'd have with a nice piece of Stilton cheese, at least it's got some substance to it, and there's some element of whole grain in there. In terms of bread is generally, I avoid it like the plague, because most of the bread that you can buy these days is bloody awful. If I knew someone that was making bread, or you could buy a bread maker and you got some really good quality whole grain flour, or you buy some of this artisanal, you know, whole grain bread that's properly made without all the rubbish stuffed in it, then that's going to spike your insulin levels a lot less, because again, your stomach's going to take a lot longer to break that stuff down than what it would with some of the, especially the fluffy white breads that no doubt taste real nice, but they just, you know, they're virtually nothing, are they? You know, as soon as you eat them, they're just going to be you know, sent straight around the bloodstream. There's nothing really to break down there, and you can tell the difference when you eat them. You know, if you buy a real high quality loaf of bread from an artisanal bakery, you can bite into it and it's actually difficult to chew through because it's got some real substance to it. Whereas white bread, I mean, I could just get 3 slices and like squish them up into a ball and stuff the lot in my mouth and swallow it in a few seconds. You know, it's there's no real substance to it, so it's pretty clear which one is going to be longer to be broken down in the body. And actually, a lot of these things, I wish I'd kept the data, but back in the day when I was studying all this stuff, I was actually using a blood glucose measuring machine, the same as a diabetic would use, and I was eating various different things and then measuring my blood glucose just to see if it lined up with all this stuff, which of course it was exactly as you thought it would be. It did. It kicked up some interesting results as well, like another one, people always go, oh, have a banana, they're really healthy. Well, bananas actually spiked my blood sugars just as high as a portion of McDonald's fries did. So bananas aren't particularly healthy. They're quite high in calories. I think they've got the most fruits considered to be healthier than other sweet things, because fruits are generally the sweetness in them comes from fructose rather than glucose, whereas bananas have a much lower fructose level and a much higher glucose level, so they tend to spike your blood sugar more. And also the consistency of the fruit, they're not particularly high in fibre unless you eat the skin as well, which would be disgusting. But you know, the fruits that are generally better to select are things like berries, you know, the quite fibrous products like whole kiwi fruits, where I eat the skin as well, and you give yourself, you know, your stomach something really to break down. Apples are fantastic. A lot of the citrus fruits are good because they have a high fructose level, low glucose level, and you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of calorific content, especially with berries. You know, you can eat quite a lot of mixed berries, so like blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and you know, you would struggle to eat so many that you were going mad on calories. You know, you would probably be visiting the toilet pretty rapidly if you ate that many anyway, and it would leave your system one way or another. The other thing with bananas that makes me laugh is people always say, yeah, but they're high in potassium. And I'm like, yeah, well, so's ice cream. So is that a successful argument then to eat stuff that, you know, you can get away with it because it's high in something? You know, if I eat a whole tub of Haagen-Dazs ice cream to myself and I just say, yeah, but it's high in potassium, so there you go, it's good. And that leads me on to the other things. You know, a lot of these things become like excuses that people make. So people like chocolate, so they'll dig out scientific studies, or the newspapers will often publish these parts of these studies which they sort of twist to their own headline news. So it'll say like, dark chocolate's good for you, you know, everyone can relax, man, because you can eat dark chocolate. Well, yeah, the scientific studies have shown that a certain part in dark chocolate, one of the elements of dark chocolate, has shown benefit in terms of cardiovascular health in scientific studies. But what the scientific study was based around was not getting a load of people to eat like a bar of dark chocolate every day. You know, it was looking specifically at this one compound. So people use that as an excuse. They say, well, I had some chocolate, but you know, it was dark chocolate, so I'm pretty good. You know, the rest of the stuff in the chocolate is way offsetting any benefit that you might have had from this, you know, the small component of that chocolate that has been shown to have some sort of heart health benefit. Is it better than eating a bar of dairy milk? Yeah, probably it is, but you know, that's like you know, is it better to play on the motorway or a major A road? You know, like, well, yeah, the A road, but it's still not great. And you get the same thing with red wine. You know, people say, oh yeah, I have I don't really drink, but I do drink red wine because that's really good for you. No, it's not. Alcohol is poison. Like, look, I sometimes drink alcohol. I actually drank alcohol on Christmas Day and I regretted it. I had like 4 little 4 IPAs, the small cans, and I felt absolute junk the next morning. All my sinuses hurt, my head ached, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to do this again. So it doesn't suit me. I don't really like alcohol, but people sort of make excuses for alcohol because they want to drink it. So again, there's been some studies that have shown that a very small amount of red wine, so let's say half a glass a day with your meal, has been linked to improvements in cardiovascular health. Well, those studies are interesting because most of those studies correlate with societies that are also they drink wine as part of their culture. They don't tend to over drink and binge drink like the English do, and maybe some other cultures do. So the more Mediterranean culture, where wine is just a part and parcel of your dinner and you don't over consume it. And not only that, but a lot of the other things that they're doing in their nutritional culture is also very beneficial to heart health. So it becomes quite difficult then to disseminate exactly what the benefits of the wine are. There definitely has been some studies that show that there are some things in red wine that can be beneficial, but alcohol is a poison. No matter how much you have of it, you're always going to be offsetting, you know, any possible benefit that it has with the fact that you're also poisoning your body, and you're causing your liver to work harder than it should, your kidneys to work harder than it should, because your body is desperately trying to excrete the poisons from itself. It will not tolerate alcohol. It wants rid of alcohol. There's no doubt about that. And you know, one of the reasons when you drink alcohol that a lot of people get a bad stomach and they don't process their food properly is because the body is so busy trying to expel alcohol, because it's poison, that it actually switches off from, you know, processing food and stuff that's in your stomach. And I sound like a real negative when it comes to alcohol. Look, I've drank my fair share of alcohol, but I'm just giving it to you straight that if you're drinking alcohol, it's not going to do you any good. And if you're trying to train and get into really good shape, forget it. Then in terms of other food that's, you know, lauded to be good, the whole concept of you know, convenient health foods, you know, pre-packed bars, you know, whether they be energy bars, breakfast biscuits, all that kind of stuff that's all aimed at the, you know, person in a rush that's still trying to be healthy. Or breakfast shakes is another big one, you know, that a lot of the companies are espousing. Again, none of that stuff is good. It's all convenience food. It's all, you know, compressed carbohydrates that are were whole grains once, you know, in a life before they got chucked in a machine and blended to hell. But you know, they're not doing you any good, and all you have to do is spend about an extra 15 minutes actually preparing a decent breakfast. Like scrambled eggs on whole grain, decent quality whole grain, the artisanal bread we were talking about, would be a far superior breakfast. Porridge would be a far superior breakfast. A bowl of fruit with some natural yogurt on it, with the you know, the bacteria in the yogurt, which is good for your gut health, that would be a far superior breakfast to a packet of these biscuits or one of these breakfast bars. So knock them on the head. And then we get to people espousing the types of diet you should be on that are the most healthy. So I've heard people talk about, we shouldn't eat like we do now, we should eat like when we were cavemen, or we should eat, you know, back in the hundreds of years ago we were so much more healthy. Well, that's kind of pseudoscience. You know, it sounds right when they say it. That's what pseudoscience is. It's stuff that sounds believable, so you believe it, and it's kind of like history based or science based. So that sounds so believable, doesn't it, that like cavemen were super healthy and they were like real specimens and stuff. Well, they weren't. You know, the further you go back in time, the less healthy people were, to the point that, you know, the further you go back, people were lucky if they got to 25 or 30 years old, and they were generally dying of horrific diseases because they weren't getting the right nutrition. And the human race evolved a lot of the time based on the fact that nutrition came along, you know. So they started to work out, you can cook meat. You know, that's thought to have led to quite large advances in the IQ and brain capacity of humans, and their strength and their ability to hold muscle tissue and to, you know, to be able to run away from things or to run towards things and capture them or whatever. So this concept that we were once these amazing human beings that were like super powerful, and we've kind of gone downhill from there. We do have a massive obesity epidemic, there's no doubt, but even in the face of that epidemic, human beings are still living longer than they've ever done before. So if you scan that, we live longer now than we did before. It's not the other way around. So I don't know why you would revert to eating some seeds and nuts that, you know, you think someone would have gleaned out of a hedgerow. You know, they were dying at young ages because they weren't getting a sufficient diet. So that isn't a great way to base your diet now on, when you've got such a massive wide range of food to choose from. And the same goes, you know, I was eating a vegan diet for about 3 or 4 years. I wanted to try it, and you know, I don't do things by halves, so I tried it, and what I found was, when I lived down in Brighton, the place is full of vegan cafes, vegan supermarkets. Brighton is like vegan central, so it was great there. You know, it was pretty easy for me to get on with my day. I was working in Brighton, I was living, you know, just down the road, so it was easy for me to do all my shopping, get what I wanted, pop into a place if I didn't have something, and go and fetch it. And the problem with eating vegan is to get a decent protein profile. It's entirely possible to get a decent protein profile from plants and plant-based foods, but you have to have a real good mixture, because the proteins that you're getting aren't complete. So when you eat incomplete proteins, your body will again catabolize its own muscle tissue to supplement the missing amino chains in those proteins, and you're basically you're catabolizing your own body to get nutrition out of what you've just eaten, which isn't any way to get stronger and get healthier. And that probably is why you see a lot of very ill looking vegans, because to eat a successful vegan diet, you have to make a real effort to eat a decent, you have to do your research, find out what makes up these complete proteins, and then buy foods around that research and eat all those foods as like a large mixed salad of various different beans, nuts, seeds, pulses, and leaves and whatever. Then great. If you've got the time to do that and you're dedicated, fantastic. If you're just eating like veggie burgers and chips, you're going to get seriously ill, and you're not going to impress anyone with your veganism, because you're going to look like junk, and you're going to tell people stop eating animals, and they're going to look at you in your pasty 4.5 stone body, and they're going to think, no thanks, I'll keep eating the animals. So, you know, if you really believe in veganism, then take the responsibility and actually eat a decent diet. I did it, I couldn't keep it up. I have to travel for work. You know, I went to places for work where I'd say I wanted something vegan, and they just look at me like I was mental, because I'm in the middle of, you know, a jungle in Malaysia. I mean, one place I said that, and the lady served me the food, and I said, well, this tastes like it's got meat in. She said, well, it has, but I cut it up really small, because they just didn't have any concept of you know, what veganism was. They actually, a lot of the countries and cultures I've dealt with find my request for vegan food to be entitled, because a lot of them, they're lucky if they've got food and they're sharing some food with you, and for you to kind of say, no, I don't want that, I only want, you know, this plant or whatever, they just don't have that in their vocabulary. They're like, well, you're lucky you're eating anything, you know. So there's a cultural side to that as well. Also, there are places where I've been where they're only vegan, you know, and they're very happy to give me vegan food, and they're serving up lovely food. So it goes both ways, but generally speaking, you can't rely on the fact that that's always going to happen. Anyway, went off on a bit of a tangent at the end, but I hope that gives you some food for thought, and I'll come back with some more of these lifestyle things. People seem to enjoy them. Take care, guys. Have a good one.